And there it is. The Overwatch League playoffs are done. Today I'm going to ramble about my overall thoughts on the event because it definitely did not disappoint when looking at the event as a whole. I figure it would be fun to reflect upon the games, the teams, and the fact that we do have a new champion. But I also wanted to reflect upon a personal experience of mine. Thanks to my journalism internship with the Game House, I was able to attend the post-finals press conference and ask a couple of questions. Stay tuned until the end of the video if you want to hear my thoughts about that experience. As for now, I really want to start this video off with the champions. How about the Shanghai Dragons, from the 0-40 meme team to 2021 Grand Finals champions? It goes to show that any franchise can turn it around if they make the right decisions. What I absolutely love about their journey is the consistent progress. From Season 1 to Season 2, they kind of took that initial step towards becoming respectable as they went on to win the Stage 3 title and make the play-in tournament. From there, they made some adjustments to the coaching staff, then picked up a ton of key contributors like Void, Fleta, and Lee Jae Gon. And now this year here in Season 4, they took that final step to finally put themselves over the top. While they did lose a great playmaker like Fearless over the offseason, they did replace him with a great fit for Coach Moon's overall vision. In the post-finals press conference, Coach Moon actually talked about this transition and why he wanted to maybe get Fate, because he said he wanted a selfless main tank at the time who prioritized setting up his teammates rather than making a lot more of the individual plays like Fearless. And I think it's safe to say that Fate did this perfectly. He was a real superstar. He was playing some of the best Overwatch of his career, and I'm happy that people have recognized his contributions. He really does deserve it. He literally played exactly up to Coach Moon's vision. His level of play on Wrecking Ball was absurd. Once again, referring back to the press conference, this time with the losing team, this was something that Sephi, coach of the Atlanta Reign, referenced. He said that Fate was a menace on Wrecking Ball. Fate and the Shanghai Dragons were unmatchable on the dive comps in his eyes, hence why they chose not to bother mirroring them. And I can't help but agree with him there. It was the strongest comp to use, and the Dragons were clearly the best at it. Generally speaking, the last 2 years have been full of dominance for the Dragons. It's honestly so impressive. They were always in contention to win a title, both this year and last year, I would say, and it was never even out of the question. Last year, it was more about the experience and getting their feet wet in the playoffs. This year was about playing up to expectations and taking this thing home. They got it done, and I would say in convincing fashion. There was not a single team that made them truly sweat during the playoffs. The Gladiators in Dallas, yeah, they both took a map each, but the Dragons definitely felt in control for the most part. The Dragons are definitely one of the best teams in the history of Overwatch 1. They deserve this title more than anybody else. Nobody could stop them. What the Dragons put out there for the world to see was a true superstar effort where every single starting player was basically worthy of being a role star and MVP. Speaking of MVPs, Lip getting the finals MVP was well deserved because he really took over in the second half of that series. He kept going on those crazy flanks while doing a great job of disrupting Kai. This man was mad that he didn't win regular season MVP, so he went ahead and won a different trophy instead. Although some might argue that Izayaki deserved to win this trophy a bit more, and I think that's totally fine. He also played a great series, but I have no issue with Lip winning this whatsoever. Overall, from the Dragons, a very convincing Grand Finals victory and playoff run. Seriously, congrats to the Shanghai Dragons franchise. I am super proud of them on how far they've come. But of course, the Dragons are far from the only interesting storyline in the playoffs. How about the Atlanta Reign, the runner-ups? That finals run through the lower bracket was special. They beat some damn good teams to make it there. We're talking Dallas and LA, aka two of their biggest rivals in the West. They took down two of the best teams in the league, two of the teams that had a better record than them in the same conference. Those guys were great. I assumed their playoffs would basically go the same way to the Countdown Cup, but no. They got to play a ton of more rush, and I think they took full advantage. It's their bread and butter pick, and it shows. Other teams tried to mirror them, but to no avail. They were the best rush team, plain and simple. As great as Kai, Iris, and Pelican were, though, I think Atlanta's comfort picks and strong adaptability proved to be more beneficial for the rest of the roster. Gator was looking especially strong on that Reinhardt, and Masa's Lucio, it was on point. Honestly though, the real star of the show might have been Hawk. I fully admit I had not been giving him nearly enough credit this year because this dude has always been so clutch, and it really showed during the playoffs in particular. Like, is it just me, or did he save his best performances on the year for last during the playoffs? Because his Diva was phenomenal. The big kills and ults he was negating were game changers. Like, he kept on eating Nero's blizzards and stuff during the Shock game, and those were just a couple of examples. Give this guy some love because he played his heart out, and it shows. The combined effort of this entire team led to something special. People were doubting them, and they made non-believers like myself pay for it. They used it as motivation. Speaking of motivation, they used the idea of having fun and being the quote-unquote villains to their advantage. A lot of people wanted them to lose after they started doing some trash talk after games. Fans started to hate watch them, I guess you could say. Every time they advanced, it probably felt incredible for the Reign. They were having fun out there, and that is exactly why they were able to go as far as they did. When you're playing pressure-free Overwatch, you instantly have an advantage over some of these other teams with high expectations. Honestly, I'm glad the Reign played the villains. It gave the league more personality. There's nothing wrong with a little banter in my opinion. I know a lot of people want everybody to be respectful like all the time, but the fact of the matter is, every player is human. Sports and competing in general can get you emotional, and I don't think anyone has the right to take that away from an athlete. At the end of the day, none of them are trying to be mean on purpose. They don't hate each other, it's all in good fun. And guess what? Hate watching also brings in ratings for some of you people who maybe don't like those people who get on the Reign for being so angry at them. Sure, some people can be overly toxic, and I recognize that, but having that team you cheer against is part of sports. It gives people more reason to watch, you know? Are the so-called villains going to lose at some point? And when they do, who's it going to be against? And just imagine how great it's going to feel for the people who truly do want them to lose. I know it sounds toxic, but I for one think every sport needs a villain. I can appreciate some personality, and I thank the Reign for taking on this role. Someone had to do it, and I think the Reign delivered perfectly. Their grand finals attempt, it wasn't what they wanted it to be, but that's okay. They defied expectations this year, and they had a great season. They can walk away feeling very proud heading into Season 5 and whatever chapter brings with Overwatch 2. Speaking of expectations, how about the Shock? The three-peat, huh? It wasn't meant to be, and I'm kind of surprised. They had another great roster on their hands, but it just wasn't enough this time, because, you know, other teams caught up to them finally. San Fran did what they could. I think that Shanghai, though, they outplayed them big time, which made their lives a lot harder in the losers bracket for a couple of different reasons. But to be fair, even through all of that, they had a decent run. They won 2 close games in a row before that Atlanta loss happened, and I thought that Choi, Nero, and Glister all stepped up big time. But again, what they showed just wasn't good enough, as they weren't even able to finish top 3 this year. So their vice grip over the league finally ends here. Crazy to think that their era of dominance is finally over. They are no longer invincible, and it's difficult to say what is going to happen next year, because this team, they've been together for a long time, and I think a bunch of their players will genuinely contemplate retirement or moving on to a different team. Many familiar faces may choose to move on, folks. Big decisions have to be made as we head into Overwatch 2. The Shock might have to start preparing for a transition of sorts. It's going to be very interesting to see where they choose to go now that the championship reign is finally over. On the subject of championship aspirations, it was a bit tough for the Dallas Fuel to have their journey end the way it did. They played really well at the start. I mean, they were looking scary. Their 2 victories to make winners finals were very convincing. The ball comps, they finally seemed to be on point. They practiced them very hard during the Countdown Cup, and it shows with the results. But then they ran into Shanghai, and that was kind of the end of it. Once the Dragons went in and beat them the way they did, it was clear that the Fuel had some limits to surpass still if they wanted to win a championship. Their momentum got halted, and they ran into the worst possible opponent for that kind of situation. And of course, I'm referring to the Atlanta Reign, who had tons of momentum at this point. It's a little sad to see a team with this much talent not make the finals, but hey, how they went down is not to be ashamed of. They lost to both grand finalists. If you can only be taken down by the very best, it goes to show that you are worthy of being a contender. The honest-to-God truth is they played teams who were the best at certain things. Shanghai, they were the best overall ball team. Then you have Atlanta, who were the best at rush. So naturally, it's going to be hard to beat either one of them in a mirror, and we know that Dallas likes to take those. Again, this group did everything they could. Dallas fans should have zero reason to be angry at this team right now. It's a disappointing end to a great year, but they went out with honor. And they surpassed expectations this year if we go back to the preseason. Dallas fans should feel incredibly proud. Just remember though, they're going to be back next year for sure. It's a whole new game, but if this roster stays the way it is, they'll be talented enough to figure it out and be right back in contention again. On the topic of figuring things out, that gets me into the Justice and Fusion now. It's safe to say that they both went out feeling disappointed with their runs. Washington mostly because they just couldn't get anything going. They got outplayed by teams that were simply way better. This seemed like a great time for the Justice to maybe get it going in theory. The meta seemed to be playing more up to their favor. The problem was those blasted inconsistency issues. The more I think about it, the more I realize this team probably wasn't well coached enough. As much as I respect that coaching staff because they have found previous success either on other teams or in just previous years, the philosophies they instilled this year weren't the greatest, and if certain players couldn't break nasty habits, that's partially on them as well. There were problems that needed fixing, and those problems hurt them until the very end. That indecisiveness really hurt them. It's something they have to look into if they intend to keep this core of players. The Justice could have been a lot more, so it truly is heartbreaking to see them go down this way. On the topic of heartbreak, you know what that means, Philly fans. It's your turn. It's the same old story no matter what. The Glads game, I think it seemed pretty good at first, but then it quickly got ugly in that second half. As for the Shock game, they had a serious chance in that one, but they kind of blew it. San Fran let them hang around. That was a very, very winnable game, but it often felt like Carpe was the only guy showing up. You hate to see it. I feel so bad. Carpe is one of the hardest workers in the league, and yet it's always the same painful end result. Philly lacked that killer instinct this year. Their only real shining moment was probably like beating Seoul or that 3-0 against Shanghai, and maybe during May Melee I thought they looked really good then as well. Overall though, it's a sad sight. The only positive I can really take away is they went down fighting in the playoffs this time. They went 5 maps with their rivals from just a year ago. It's like a more honorable way to go out than what we saw in the Final Four last year, where they just got blown out both games. Much like the Shock, though, it's hard to tell where the Fusion go from here. Does Philly consider moving on from the Carpe era finally? I have no idea where the Fusion decide to go. I just hope they finally find the answer for the sake of their fans. As for Chengdu and the Gladiators, I don't have too much to say about either of them, because they did not go as far as I hoped they would, but I also recognize they could have played a lot worse. Chengdu losing to Dallas so easily, then losing to a Shock team they were better than all year essentially, kind of stings. I thought that Leaf played great overall, but it was clear that the team was not in the greatest of spirits, and as it turns out, there was a reason for it. According to RUI, coach of the Chengdu Hunters, Yveltal did some hardcore messing around. The OW Beacon on Twitter reports that Yveltal had attitude problems where he would not play well in scrims, nor was he taking them seriously. He apparently got caught on multiple occasions reading manga and watching streams during scrims. It goes without saying that this type of behavior in the workplace is unacceptable. Yveltal was playing the best Overwatch of his career during the regular season, but somehow, some way, he lost his motivation all of a sudden, and he handled it in the worst way possible. RUI tried to get him to stop, but to no avail. Yveltal let his teammates down. It forced the Hunters to play a different support lineup that went against their previous success. And guess what? Despite all of that, RUI still gave him a chance to play in the Dallas series. That's how much Yveltal means to the Hunters. Chengdu hit a really bad mental stretch at the worst possible time. But hey, at the end of the day, only one game wasn't close, that being the Dallas one. But one can't help but wonder if things could have gone a little differently under alternate circumstances. The Gladiators, on the other hand, well, they mostly got outplayed. Just like Dallas, they lost to both finalists. I give them a lot of credit, though. They pushed the Atlanta Reign to their breaking point. The Glads nearly altered history, and some people don't realize that. Those boys played hard. Their main playmakers put in God's work. They're kind of in the same position as the Fuel, really. You know, they could have gone all the way with some better execution. They had the talent there, but it just wasn't meant to be. But you know what? That's okay. They had a really successful year, and their core for Overwatch 2, it's looking sick. Kevster and Shu, they're gods. Muse and Skewed, they can only get better from here. And they have lots of good veterans if a bunch of them decide to stay. I fully expect these guys to be back in contention next year. It was not the end they were looking for, but they did go out with honor, and that's all you can really ask for. Thinking about the playoffs as a whole, I enjoyed the experience. There were some really fun matches. You had a couple of map vibes involving the Shock, who were on the way to almost being eliminated trying to defend their title. Then you had the Glad's Reign rivalry, which was epic as usual. The surprises were certainly there too. Atlanta making the grand finals, yeah, that was pretty unexpected. I did not think they would play that good. I thought maybe they could make a decent lower bracket run, but never did I foresee them playing this good. In addition, you had things like Dallas absolutely destroying Chengdu to complete their revenge, and the Shock finally coming to the end of their era. There were some fun storylines to follow, some good banter, and great games, and that's all I could ever ask for from a tournament event. It wasn't the best playoffs I've ever seen, but it sure as hell wasn't the worst either. My only real complaint was how fast things had to move. I don't really think they had a choice in the matter, but doing the playoffs all in 1 week was draining for basically everybody. Staying up until 2, 3 a.m. for me personally, while having to pay attention and make content made for a big grind. It was a lot of fun, but it took its toll. I don't have it the worst by any means, though. I feel way worse for all of the EU fans out there. You guys have it the worst, and it's not even close. If you like watching games live, you were forced into a true D-Gen schedule. I really hope the league can account for you guys better in the future. That's really it, though, because everything else was great. They kept the hype building constantly. I thought that the Watchpoint crew killed it as usual, and then the Overwatch 2 reveal stuff was very refreshing. All in all, it was a great weekend, and I wouldn't trade it away for the world. I love doing this. It has become a lifestyle for me. But some of you are probably still curious about me attending that press conference I mentioned earlier and how that went. Well, my supervisor approached me with the opportunity and I gladly accepted it. I, along with many other journalists, got to join a virtual meeting after the game. We interviewed the Atlanta Reign first, then the Shanghai Dragons. I unfortunately only managed to ask one question for both teams, but that was more than enough for my first experience. Just being able to be in that room with other journalists and multiple teams was a dream come true. It was a surreal experience that made me feel proud of how far I've come. At first, I felt kind of nervous going into the thing, but it quickly turned into excitement the moment I saw a bunch of familiar faces. I was smiling the whole way through, I kid you not, and what made it even better is how I got to actually interact with some really cool people. So some of you might want to know what I asked these people and what answers I got, and I got you because I did take some notes. On the Atlanta side of things, I decided to ask Gator a question. I brought up how the Reign improved a lot this year, and I wanted to know what him and his teammates did to improve so much. Gator's answer was he thought they became more flexible as a team. He believes their teamwork got better as well, and on top of that, he thought the new player additions helped out a lot. The Atlanta people who attended were very professional despite losing the finals. The Reign guys remained positive and they were transparent with their answers the whole way through, and I was very impressed. Seffi in particular, I thought that he was very insightful, which is something I appreciated a lot. In the Shanghai Dragons conference, my question went out to Coach Moon. What I wanted to know was how him and the coaching staff treat preparation. Obviously, the West and the East have very different styles as we saw throughout the whole year. So I was curious if the preparation was any different, but his answer was straight up no. He takes an overall approach to it. He explained that they always just think about what comp would work the best, and that's all there really is to it. And I kind of figured this was the answer, but I gave it a shot anyway because you never really know. I really wanted to ask another question to the Shanghai group, but we unfortunately ran out of time. I wasn't expecting any crazy answers from this event or anything. I kind of just went there for some experience, and that's what I got. I wanted to talk to these people. All I can really say is this was a real dream come true, and it signifies how far I've come. Attending this press conference is something I can never forget. This was a very happy moment for me. It gets me pumped knowing that this is probably only the beginning of my journey too. But that pretty much concludes my review and experience of the Overwatch League playoffs. It was a very fitting end to the Overwatch 1 era. So much awesome stuff happened in the span of 5 days. Overall, the playoffs were good. I can move on to the next chapter of the league feeling satisfied. Now I would like to hear your thoughts though. Leave your own reviews and feelings on the playoffs in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe. I mean seriously, if you're interested in staying up to date on my content, you definitely should hit that sub button because this offseason is going to be wild. Free agency by itself will offer a ton of content, but lots of other one-off content will be coming as well. You can expect things like my role star reaction, what I learned from every team in Season 4, and a Season 4 review in the near future, as well as some other things. I'm also going to be writing lots of articles for the Game House on top of that, so keep a lookout on the community tab for any potential articles I announce. But until then, guys, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.